Your metabolism is so much more than weight gain and weight loss. It quite literally involves everything inside of your body that keeps you alive. Every cellular, chemical, and biological response, from sleeping to growing your hair to healing wounds and gut issues, having energy, and yes, of course, gaining and losing weight. Did you know that a messed up gut can absolutely destroy your metabolism, compromising everything that it does for you? So with today's episode, you're going to be able to understand what your metabolism actually is and why it's so important, and the role that your gut plays in your overall metabolic health. Today's guest is the famous Ben Azadi, world famous functional diagnostic nutritionist, best-selling author, New York Times as of recent, which is amazing. He's a lecturer, podcaster, and one of the top metabolic health shows in the world that he runs called Metabolic Freedom, formerly known as Keto Camp. Now, Ben is here to help you understand what your metabolism actually is and why it's broken. And if you don't think that yours is, think again. More than 90% of all North Americans, statistically speaking, are metabolically unhealthy. And that means you. And it even means, unfortunately, me. And today, Ben is going to take us through what metabolic dysfunction actually means and how your metabolism is designed to work. He's going to teach us about the state of our metabolisms today, why they're so broken, and what it is that you can do about it to begin healing yourself. He'll talk about how our guts and metabolisms are directly linked and how healing one can help heal the other. We'll talk about how your environment is hurting you, and most of the time, how you can actually make these very simple changes to shift your body into burning fat as fuel. Even if you struggle with the ability to do it right now, it can be fixed. And Ben is also going to talk to us about something that's been kept secret from us, which is how your brain and your thoughts actually communicate with your DNA to make you healthier or to make you sicker. We're going to get into this one with Ben Azadi. Welcome to ReversABLE.
Josh, it's an honor. Love your work. I had fun with you here in Miami when I interviewed you for my podcast, and it's an honor to be on your show today.
It's a pleasure to have you in. And it's so funny. I know we were actually supposed to record 2 episodes back to back for your show and my show when I was actually at your studio in Miami. Unfortunately, timing and sunshine and beach time just didn't line up.
I told you, go catch the sunset. We could do this on virtual, and that's what we're doing today.
Yeah, had to prioritize the physiological needs over the business, as I think we need to more often.
Yes, I love that you did that.
Yes, we did. And so what I want to talk about is more physiological needs today, Ben. We have so much to dive into, and talking about the term metabolic dysfunction is extraordinarily confusing for some people. So before we dive into anything else, can you just define metabolic dysfunction for me so we can then use it as a segue to introduce you to our guests or to our listeners?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So to define metabolic dysfunction, we need to first define metabolism. And the Greeks refer to metabolism as the term transform, meaning the metabolism, the way that God built this amazing human body, the metabolism is designed to take different substrates. And what I mean by substrates are proteins from food, which are amino acids, fats, fatty acids, carbohydrates, or even oxygen, sunshine, and even body fat, whatever is available, to use that to fuel your cells, to fuel your mitochondria, to produce energy, to burn fat, to live a long, healthy life. So we're designed to transform those substrates into energy, hence the word transform by the Greeks. Metabolic dysfunction means your metabolism, for many reasons which we will discuss, is not able to transform these substrates. So that leads to symptoms. The most common symptoms are, of course, unwanted weight gain, with the inability to lose that weight, no matter how hard you cut your calories or diet or exercise. Brain fog is very common. Of course, the digestive issues that you speak so eloquently about. And it's the first domino to fall that leads to serious conditions like cancer and severe autoimmune diseases and other conditions that, like kidney failures, that are a result of the metabolism's inability to use whatever substrates are available. So there's a term called metabolic flexibility that Mark Sisson really made popular, and that is the key. The key is to develop a metabolism that is flexible enough to use whatever substrate is available. For example, somebody who's metabolically healthy and flexible, I call metabolic freedom, is somebody who they're traveling for 12 hours. They're going to the airport, they're in the airplane, and they're going to different locations, and they decide, hey, and this is me, by the way, I don't want to eat the toxic food at the airport. So I'm going to let my healthy metabolism use the substrate of my body fat to fuel me and feel good and not do any damage, but actually improve my health, right? That is somebody who's metabolically flexible. Somebody who's metabolically dysfunctional or inflexible can't do that. They have to eat something every 2 to 3 hours. It needs to be sugar. They have to constantly give themselves this glucose and insulin hit just to sustain energy, because they don't have the ability to tap into body fat or produce ketones or do all the wonderful things that metabolism is designed to do. So here in the United States, studies are showing that 88% to 93% of Americans are metabolically unhealthy. They are handcuffed to counting calories or extreme measures like measuring food, but eating every 2 to 3 hours just to have a spark of energy and a hit of glucose. So what I want to teach them, and what we're going to teach them on this conversation, is how to achieve this metabolic freedom. So you feel good, you burn fat, you lower inflammation, and you're not handcuffed by your next snack or your next meal.
Damn, Ben, you are clearly a keynote speaker. I know that about you. You travel lots, you speak at conferences all over. You got your own podcast. Was it 250,000 followers on YouTube, subscribers? Like, you really know how to eloquently put things. I really define metabolism as any chemical process in the body used to maintain life. Yours is so much more philosophical and just so brilliantly and eloquently spoken. But at this stage, I think the listeners are going, okay, I'm hooked. Like, I'm in. I'm all in. Metabolic freedom, flexibility. It sounds incredible. But who the hell is Ben Azadi? He's kind of like this ultimate citizen scientist. You're an FDNP, or a functional diagnostic nutritional practitioner. Can you tell us about you, who you are, how you got here, a bit of your background, so our listeners can really understand that you're not sitting up in your ivory tower as someone who's always been here. You've got quite a story.
Yeah, and thank you for that. I appreciate that, Josh. Great question, by the way, to start this. I'm somebody who struggled with my metabolism, and that's kind of a light way to put it. My metabolism was really dysfunctional. I was obese as a child growing up here in Miami, Florida, where I still currently live. And growing up, my parents had an arranged marriage. They were from Iran. It's very common there, and they immigrated here, and I'm first generation American. And they were divorced when I was 4 years old. So my mom raised me essentially. She worked 3 jobs, and 2 of those jobs were at a Kentucky Fried Chicken, which of course is a fast food restaurant that fries chicken and vegetable oils. And she would bring me home Kentucky Fried Chicken because it's the best she could do with her circumstances. She did the best to her ability and her knowledge and her awareness. And I was such a happy kid. And my mom was bringing me home Kentucky Fried Chicken, and I was very unhealthy as a result. And not only that, I was a sugar burner. I was eating every 2 to 3 hours. I had bad behaviors and addictions to drugs and alcohol and video games and other really bad behaviors. So as a kid, I was very unhealthy. As a teenager, unhealthy in high school, smoking weed. I was obese physically, obese mentally, depressed. And everything really took a turn for the worst when I was 24 years old back in 2008. I hit rock bottom, where I was working at this 9-to-5 job that I hated. It was very uninspiring. I was going out with my girlfriend at the time for about 4 years, and she ended up breaking up with me. And I was so devastated. I didn't know what to do, and I was crying every single day. At this time, I weighed 250 pounds. I had inflammation. Like, my body was on fire every single day. My back was on fire. My knees were on fire. I had brain fog, digestive issues, pure sugar burner. And I thought, for me, the easiest thing to do was to end my life. And I explored that. I explored suicide. I wanted to end the suffering and end the pain. I was tired of crying and being so unhealthy every day. And what stopped me was thinking about my mom. Every time I explored suicide, a thought came in my mind, which was, what about your mother? What about the devastation she would have to deal with? And I love my mom. She's a superhero. She's done so much for me. As a matter of fact, when we're done recording here, I'm driving to her apartment with my fiance to have dinner with her. We do that every Thursday. So it stopped me from pursuing that. It's the only thing that stopped me from taking my life. And I knew I had to figure things out because I was unhappy. I was unhealthy. I was broke. I was broken. So for me, it actually started with my mental health and my psychology before I started with my physiology. And I started to read books. I started to read authors like Dr. Wayne Dyer. And man, he would say things that would make me angry and inspire at the same time. He would say things like, look, if you keep blaming other people for your problems and your circumstances, you would have to hire a psychiatrist for the rest of the world in order for you to get better. And I thought, damn, that is so unrealistic. Like blaming other people, it's just a failure. It's not going to work. It's just a form of failure, essentially. He would say things as well like, hey, what happens when you squeeze an orange? What comes out? Well, obviously, orange juice. Why is that? Because that's what's inside. Well, what happens when life squeezes you and applies pressure? What comes out? What's inside? Meaning your thoughts, your feelings, your actions. And life was applying a lot of pressure. And what was coming outside of me was a victim mindset, blaming my genetics, blaming my slow metabolism, blaming my enabling family members, blaming XYZ. When in reality, I'm the only problem I ever have, which sounds like a bad thing. But the great thing is that I'm also the only solution. Same thing for you. You're the only problem you ever have. You're also the only solution. So I started to understand this and I started to change my mindset. I started to move my body. I started to exercise. And 9 months after taking full responsibility and ownership and stopping from being the victim of my history and starting to become the victor of my destiny, I lost 80 pounds in 9 months. I went from 250 pounds all the way down to 170 pounds. I went from 34% body fat, classified as obese, to as low as 6% body fat. And finally carved out a physical six pack, which is something I always dreamed of. However, most importantly, I achieved a mental six pack and what it did for my mental health. And that was 16 plus years ago. I have been, just like you, Josh, learning and then unlearning and then relearning, student, teacher. And I've written, books along the way. And we're just on a mission to educate as many people as possible. And we have a strong emphasis on metabolic health, especially as it pertains to insulin resistance and diabetes.
I love it. And that's such a powerful testimony, I think, to come from. There are so many practitioners and clinicians who are really, we'll say, more book-based, more theory, very little practice. And it's so amazing being in this functional medicine space, dealing with people like yourself and other practitioners who had been there, done that. Cynthia Thurlow, we were just talking about her. I just recorded with her before this call. She was a nurse practitioner who left that allopathic trained. You were someone who went through it. Western would have said, well, here's some antidepressants, here's some medication, here's some injections, but not treating the root cause, the root of dysfunction, the root of disease. And everything we experience has a root. Every symptom is your body screaming at you. And all we do is take this hostage and put tape over its mouth rather than let it free. And that's not a great way to make friends. So
No, it's not.
not at all. Ask me how I know. What? 911? What's your emergency? And so I want to talk about getting this metabolic freedom. I mean, you said there's a really interesting psychology. You had to address that before you addressed the physiology, which I would argue then allows you to really at the root address the microbiology of it all, going back to your microbes in your gut and all kinds. But take us through, because I want to really walk this ladder with you today to climb this wall of metabolic freedom. Let's start at the first rung. There are hurdles for people. You had your own hurdles. You had hurdles through your life. You had hurdles through depression and inflammation and mindset. What are the biggest hurdles you see for people who go, I want to be metabolically free. I want to be functional. I want my body to be healthy, perform well, look good. What is the first hurdle that most people struggle with in your experience?
Fantastic question. And I'm going to answer it with a quote and then I'll explain more. Neville Goddard said, "We are only limited by weakness of attention and poverty of imagination." So weakness of attention, let's unpack that real quick. The constant stimulation and distractions we have every day with social media, TV commercials, billboards, our friends, our family, our environment, constant weakness of attention there. And poverty of imagination is a result of that, because here's how it works. Our environment, and that is the books we read or don't read, TV shows we watch, television commercials, social media, our environment determines the thoughts that we think in our belief system. The thoughts that we think in our belief system then determines the actions we take or don't take and the habits we create, good or bad. Those habits then determine the results we get in life. And then at the end of the day, or at the end of your life, determine your destiny. So it starts with the environment. And what's holding people back is that they have a toxic environment and they might not even be aware of it. And I'll give you a perfect example. I mentioned that I'm going to have dinner with my mom, and I have dinner with her every Thursday. However, there's an issue with the dinner, and here's the issue. She makes amazing food. That's not the issue, but she has the television on every time we have dinner. And I notice the commercials, and the commercials are filled with big pharma and big food. And we have the election coming up this year, so it'll be filled with big gov as well very, very soon. So I noticed there are commercials for, of course, your field, digestive issues and Crohn's, colitis, and all that. Take this medication, but then you're going to experience 23 different side effects, and contact your doctor if that's the case.
One of them being gut issues. And,
One of them being gut issues. It doesn't make
loss
any
of
sense.
penis, death. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so wild. And then they immediately go to like a happy clip of like people smiling. It's just so crazy. But and I did some research, and I discovered that in here in the United States, 75% of all TV commercials are funded by big pharma. And out of the 195 countries in the world, only 2 countries allow this to happen. Yeah, you knew this.
I listen to your podcast.
Yeah. The United States and New Zealand are the only 2 countries that allow this. And the remaining percentages come from big food. So essentially it's big pharma, big food, big pharma, big pharma. So this is going on in our environment, and most people are not aware of it. It's going right into our subconscious mind, which is then determining our thoughts and our beliefs and all the things that I mentioned. So the first step is to become aware of your environment. Do an audit on your environment. Start to pick up all the things that are going into your subconscious mind and make that conscious decision to do something about it. And it's difficult, I get it, because there are people in your life that are talking about the things that you're not about anymore. And that's an opportunity for you to set boundaries with them, because there are essentially 2 types of people in our lives, the chargers or the drainers. And I have my students do this exercise all the time, which is to grab a piece of paper, draw a line down the middle, a line at the top, and then think about the people in your life and then put them 2 different categories. You have the chargers we'll put on the right side and the drainers on the left side. Now, the drainers are people that are complaining, they're gossiping, they're watching the television commercials, they think you need to mask these symptoms, and you feel drained after you speak to them. That's how you know they're a drainer. Then you have the people in your life that are the chargers. They support you. They are rooting for you. You feel energized after you speak to them. Josh, I feel like that with you. You are a charger in my life. And once you determine this, then you make that conscious decision to spend more time with the chargers, less time with the drainers. What that's going to do is help you make better decisions, different belief systems, better actions, habits, and essentially your destiny. So that is where it starts, with the environment.
It's really interesting when we start diving into that psychology. And I love these quotes that you bring out, very philosophical. It's one of the things I love about you, Ben, is you pull intellect from others. You're a very intellectual type, and you draw it. It's like a spider web. You can always draw it right back to the center. These big branches come out, and it really just adds a lot of not only clout, but I'd say a version of creativity for a mind to sort of wander. Some of the things that sort of tickle the subconscious to go, what an interesting way to view that lens. What an interesting way to look at this one thing. One of the terms I like to use is, if I drew a 6 on the sidewalk and I'm standing at the base of it and I'm like, Ben, that's a number 6. You're at the other side going, dude, that's a 9. And you get so much more perspective from just looking at it from a different lens. You can understand so deeply. And we're actually hitting something I didn't think we'd hit today, which is metabolic freedom starts with psychology. How do you take your input? What do you accept to be not only true, but doable and plausible? Do you believe in my Crohn's colitis space? I get people all the time. First thing I say is like, this is actually reversible. And here's why. 1, 2, 3, 4. Bullshit, they say. No way. My doctor told me this. And we're not looking at the 6 from a different perspective. And I love that you're bringing these in. It was a French philosopher, Blaise Pascal, right? And he expressed the idea. He was talking about our attention and our ability or our need to be entertained, our inability to actually focus. Where he said all of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone and just be with our thoughts. And once we start to be with our thoughts, no podcast, no music, no friends, no nothing to distract ourselves, we really can start to filter and realize, wait a minute, what thoughts are coming up? What things show up in my brain? I love that. And so psychology, that psychological rung, this is the first thing that you said you dealt with as well. So it seems to be very commonplace. And the next one you mentioned was physiology, but you had to deal with psychology before physiology. Is that the next rung you see in people's ladder, or does it go a little bit beyond that? Is there a half step? What are we looking at?
Yeah, it starts with the psychology. I love what you just shared about the 6 and looking like a 9 from a different viewpoint. It's so true. But if you just walk right here, you'll see that it's a 6, right? understanding that there's different viewpoints and different angles and being open to seeing it from different lenses. And, back to Wayne Dyer, and I don't mean to like just talk all about Wayne Dyer, but he just made such a big difference for me. He used to talk about people want to feel right. And I get comments on my social media about, haters. They come out. You see it all the time, Josh, right? Once you start growing, you get haters, and it's all part of it. And they'll say things like, yeah, you're a quack, or this is bogus, or whatever it is.
Mhm.
And I'll reply with, you're probably right about that. And they don't know how to respond. And I learned this from Wayne Dyer. It just discharges people. You can't argue with somebody who's not going to argue with you. Like, from their vantage point and their environment and their beliefs and whatever, their subconscious mind and their paradigm, they're right. Like, they believe that. So who am I to say you're wrong? So I tell them, you're probably right about that. So I do think psychology is the majority of it. But then, of course, physiology is the second piece here, and that is the second step here. But the cool thing about starting with psychology, it makes the physiology part much more achievable and easier and sustainable. So the first thing that I would recommend your audience starts to monitor are your insulin levels, your blood sugar levels and your insulin levels, because that's the first domino to fall that eventually leads to hyperinsulinemia, also called insulin resistance, which then leads to a diagnosis of prediabetes and diabetes, type 2 diabetes. And then once you're diagnosed with that, you're not really going to die from diabetes. It's rare to die from diabetes. It's what that leads to. It's the cancer, it's the heart disease, the amputations, the kidney failures. That is the door that opens up for all of those bad things to happen to you. So the first domino is that your insulin levels, and you have many hormones inside of your body, over 600 hormones inside of your body, but insulin is the primary one that stores energy. It's an energy sensing hormone. And when you are consuming a lot of carbohydrates and eating those carbohydrates frequently, there's going to be a rise in glucose in your bloodstream. And the body does not like that. It's considered a toxic state. So what does it do? It signals to your pancreas to produce insulin. Insulin's job is to shuttle that excess glucose out of your bloodstream and pack it into your cells. Now, this is a brilliant survival mechanism that God put in the body that helped us survive during famine, because we could pack on a lot of fat as much as possible until we didn't know when the next meal was coming. But now the famine never comes, and we're just constantly raising glucose and insulin. And here's what's going to happen if this continues for years. There was a study called the Whitehall study, and it showed that your insulin levels could be continuously getting cranked out, getting higher and higher and higher for on average 14 years, until the blood sugars and the A1C changes, which is the 3-month average of your A1C. And at that point, you're diagnosed with the prediabetes and diabetes. Meanwhile, it's happening year after year after year, but you wouldn't know unless you get this really important test done. It's arguably the most important test for your metabolism, and it's called a fasting insulin. It's cheap. If your doctor does not want to order it for you because they think it's experimental, you could pay 30 or 60 bucks and order it. You want your fasting insulin in the single digits. If you see it 13, 16, 17, you have slight signs of insulin resistance. If you see it over 20, you got full-on insulin resistance. Meanwhile, your blood sugars might look fine and your A1C might look fine, but that's because your insulin is just doing such a hard job cranking out the insulin to keep the blood sugars in check until it doesn't. So I would start right there, get a fasting insulin done, see where it's at, and then we can move on to the next thing.
I love that fasting insulin is considered experimental when it's one of the most studied hormones on planet Earth.
Dude.
I mean, it's so easy. And it's experimental because it's experimenting with the profits of big pharma, as far as I'm concerned.
Yes.
So,
well said.
Thank you. I do consider myself quite the scholar. So,
the American Diabetes Association actually says it on their website to this day. There's no need to get a fasting insulin done. It's criminal.
That should be illegal.
I know.
Well, I guess when you pay to have the laws made in your favor, right?
Yeah.
So what a world. Well, let's deal with some of this because I don't want to give people the worst inputs possible to damage their psychology. We dealt with some of the physiology, the fasting, insulin, and even when you talk about environmental from a psychological level, your inputs, what you take in, the feeding, the friends who feed you versus those who drain you, and there's so much more to it. I mean, we can look at even the environment in terms of what we drink, what we eat, what we breathe, the things we put on our skin, whether we smoke or drink alcohol, all these different things. But there's this other level of microbiology. And you did something really interesting actually recently with Dr. Pompa. Now, obviously here on Reversible, we talk about the gut, we talk about the microbiome. And I've actually done a couple of episodes. We talked about different diet types. Do we eat fiber? Do we not eat fiber? We had Dr. Anthony Chafee on episode 15 titled Why You Should Never Eat Vegetables Again. But I'm not anti-vegetable. I'm anti-spray and fungicides and herbicides. But you went through a very interesting self-study. I believe it was 90 days, was it, with Dr.
Yes.
Pompa? Can you talk about that for our listeners? Because what you did for your microbiome was literally unthinkable. People literally did not think it would be possible. I'd love to dive into this and deal with some of the microbiology and what you felt the benefits were from these dietary changes.
Oh yeah, I'm excited to talk about this. So I'm putting together a whole podcast and YouTube video on all the results. So depending on when this airs, it might be out already, and that'll be on the Metabolic Freedom Podcast and the Ben Azadi YouTube channel. So what I did is in October of 2023, this past October, October 1st, I decided I was going to originally just do 30 days of a carnivore diet where, to Dr. Chaffee's point, no vegetables, just protein and fat, like meat and fat for 30 days. And on day one, I did an extensive lab test, lab panel, a blood test from LabCorp, $3,500 panel. So all the thyroid markers, the lipids, but also the particles, inflammatory markers, CBC, insulin, A1C, just a whole panel on day one. But as it pertains to your work and what you just asked, I also did a stool test done to look at my gut microbiome with a company called Tend Health. And I did the stool test day one, and I shipped in my poop. That's the way it works. Dropped it in the mailbox. And I didn't get the results back until 3 weeks later. So I was 3 weeks into carnivore. And when I got the results back and I'm reviewing it, it's said on there that my gut diversity, and I think, most gut experts would agree that diversity is very, very important to have an abundant amount of different bacteria. My diversity on that day one test of the stool test was okay. It showed it was kind of like right below average of a healthy person. It wasn't dangerously low. It wasn't optimal. It was right below average. And I was missing a lot of these different keystone bacterias, and I had my ratios thrown off of bacteroids to Firmicutes and different ones out there that you know a lot about. And it said the recommendations to improve this were to avoid a keto diet, limit my red meat intake, and eat a lot of vegetables and fiber and plants. Now, I was 3 weeks into my carnivore experiment, so I was doing the complete opposite of what they recommended. And I actually ended up doing the carnivore for 90 days instead of the 30 days because I felt really good with it. And I'm like, let's push this out even more because I think it'll give us even better data when we retest. So I did 90 straight days instead of 30 days. And on day 90, same round of labs were done. Same stool test was done. And Dr. Pompa was coming over at the end of January to record some content with me. And he was here in Miami, so he came over. But he kept asking me for weeks. We had dinner a few weeks before that. Are your carnivore results in? Are your stool test results in? Are they in? I'm like, no, they're not in. They're not in yet. And literally 15 minutes before he came to my house, I checked my email and the results came in. So he was so excited about it. And that's where we sat down and created those social media clips that you spoke about. But here's what the results showed. Most people would think, man, this guy didn't have any fiber. He went against what they were recommending. He did the exact opposite of what they recommended. The results probably got worse. Well, not so fast because my diversity actually improved. My ratios of different bacteria improved. But get this, the most important thing that I saw on day 90 that was not there on day one, 7 keystone bacteria showed up on that lab test on day 90 that did not show up on day one. So it was such a different thought process and result that the chief scientific officer of this company, Tend Health, Dr. Will, he reached out to me and said, I want to hop on a Zoom to review your results. And I actually recorded it, and that's going to be a part of that podcast and video that comes out. And he reviewed everything, and he saw the same thing that we saw. And he essentially said at the end of it, like, you're changing the way I look at gut health. This guy's been doing this for 20 plus years. He's a scientific officer. So it's not what you think. And here's my thought process, and I want to hear yours on why I think it improved for me. Because I stressed my gut during those 90 days. And stressing your gut is one of the ways to create diversity. Fasting does the same thing. So by stressing the gut short term, 90 days, it allowed my gut to adapt to that stress, and that adaptation actually benefited me. Now, I would hypothesize, and this might be against Dr. Shafi, and I love him, he's amazing. I would hypothesize if I stuck with this for another 6 months or 12 months, I would see the opposite effect where my diversity would decrease because the stress would be just too much for my body to handle. So the dietary shift created the stress and the adaptation, and that's where the benefits, I believe, came from. But I want to hear your thoughts as well, Josh.
Well, there's definitely something to be said for hermetic stress, right? And what it does to the body, like physiological stressors, going out into the cold, like you said, fasting, eating meat. But it's really interesting. This is a study I reference a lot. It was published in The Scientist and Cell Reports back in 2019, I believe. I just talked about this with Cynthia on the recording prior to this one. And what they had done was, I don't know if we talked about this on your show as well when I was in Miami, but what they had done is they'd taken 2 sets of gut maps. One was from a rural Nigerian base. There was 3. We'll talk about the 2. One from rural Nigerians living on the farm, growing their own food, eating the animals on the land, walking around with no shoes, spending time in nature, like what humans were designed to do when we first walked the earth. They had a second set in a very urban, we'll say industrialized American cities, where they took these microbiome, these GI maps, and they found that those in Nigeria actually getting more exposure to more things had a much greater diversity in a much larger, broader spectrum of microbes able to digest, break down, and absorb fibers, whereas those in these urban American communities did not. They lacked a lot of it. So the argument could be made that, do these animals get a lot of these microbes in their body? I mean, when we go in, when we're being born, right? We get some in the placenta, we get some from breast milk, we get some from the birth canal coming through like a vaginal birth. And these inoculate these microbes that we lose throughout life. Babies given antibiotics destroys their bifidose and the lactose, their first 2 main bacteria they get. But think about animals out in the wild. Every one of your tissues has a microbiome, whether it's inside an organ, outside an organ, your skin, your muscles, they all have bacteria. And I suppose my hypothesis would be that these animals that we're eating in a carnivore diet, especially clean, grass-fed, grass-finished, they're not fed glyphosate-covered grains all the time, probably have some microbes you're able to introduce in combination with these hermetic, natural, environmental stressors. And like you said, stressing your gut that may have improved the diversity. I would love to see like a 1 and 2 year study on this.
Yeah, me too. And I agree with that hypothesis. That makes a lot of sense to me that would be the case. And it's interesting that I do think that glyphosate played a role there with my results as well, because essentially, and I eat organic as much as possible, but when I'm eating vegetables, sometimes I'm getting a hit of glyphosate, even if it's organic, right? So the fact that I eliminated that and ate nothing but meat, I think that also played a role there to your point. But yeah, having a 1 or 2 year study on this would be so fascinating, dude.
Very expensive though. Well, let's dive into some more of this, because we've covered now 3 rungs on our ladder of metabolic freedom. We talked about the psychology. We talked about the physiology, the habits, the things we need to do, and even the microbiology. Like, you went through this amazing study and you got your gut biome to become more diverse. With a diverse biome comes better hormonal regulation, better metabolism, insulin and blood sugar. We know really popular bacteria that are being studied now, like Akkermansia, have a role in estrogen and glucose sugar metabolism and insulin levels and all kinds to keep your blood sugar in check. 90% of your neurotransmitters are made in your gut. 70 to 90% of your immune system comes from your gut. It all comes back to the gut. But these are 3 major rungs on this ladder. Are there any more steps that you think are really important people to keep a mind of here when dealing with metabolic freedom? And we can go left, right, up, down, wherever you want, Ben.
Yeah, when I reference the 88% to 93% of people that are metabolically unhealthy, I categorize them as being in a keto deficiency. And when I say keto, I want to first, right off the bat, detach the dogma from it, because the way that I view and teach keto is not as a keto diet, but as a metabolic process. And that is what keto is. There's nothing new about it. It's just nuanced, or maybe new to some people, but it's a metabolic process, different than other diets that are actual diets. But ketosis is not going away, because as long as humans will exist, then we'll have this metabolic process. And it's been around for as long as humans have existed. And we're not designed to be in continuous ketosis, but we are designed to use it from time to time. And what I mean by that is those 88 to 93% of people, their metabolism is stuck burning sugar and glucose. And sugar and glucose as a fuel source is not in itself bad unless you're only burning sugar and glucose. I mentioned what it does for insulin levels and all that, but sugar also depletes nitric oxide from your arteries, which creates vasoconstriction, and it makes your heart pump harder. That's why people have high blood pressure with high glucose and insulin levels. Sugar depletes your collagen levels in your body as well, and you have collagen throughout your entire body, and that's not a good thing. Sugar creates something called advanced glycation end products. The acronym is AGEs, which is very appropriate because you eat a standard American diet, which is a SAD diet. SAD equals AGEs. And then the AGEs connect to receptor sites for those AGEs. So AGEs make great rages, if you will. So there's a lot of problem when you're stuck burning sugar. It's a fast way to age yourself, and we don't want that. Enter ketosis, okay? When we think about how the metabolism uses energy systems, of course, there's many different substrates that we can use, but the two primary substrates are sugar and glucose, or fat and ketones. So what we want to do is teach the body to switch over to a fat-burning fuel source, a ketone body fuel source. And how this works is when you start to lower your total carbohydrates and reduce the frequency of eating those carbs, and eventually you'll get to under 50 total grams of carbs while increasing healthy fats and proteins, you'll make that switch. You'll lower glucose and insulin, and now your metabolism like, oh, our sugar reserves are getting low, but we have all this body fat. Let's use that for energy. And now the metabolism starts using that for energy. Those fatty acids from your body fat are then sent to your liver, and then your liver produces those ketones. So that is ketogenesis, the birth of ketones. And it only works when you drop your carbohydrates low enough, which for most people is 50 total grams per day, to drop insulin low enough to achieve that. And we want to stay there for a little bit. Now, how long you stay in ketosis is going to be different on the person, but I would say if you are a sugar burner and you make the transition to a fat burner, I think 45 days is a good sweet spot before you then start flexing in and out. And I wrote a book called Keto Flex, which is the premise behind this. We don't want to be in ketosis forever, but we want to teach the metabolism to some days burn sugar, some days burn fat, and kind of go back and forth. So that I believe is a missing piece for a lot of people who have a metabolism that is inflexible. It is the fact that they have forgotten about the inability to use ketones. And one more point here, babies that are born into this world and breastfed are actually in ketosis. And you ask the question, why? Because breast milk has saturated fat and cholesterol, and it's really important for the neurological development of that baby's brain. And the brain loves ketones, the brain loves fat, it's mostly fat. And then I'll get the haters on social media saying, Ben, that is bogus. There's sugar in breast milk. How could that be true? And I will say, of course, you're probably right about that, but I have a fact here that there is sugar in breast milk. However, that baby is so efficient at using that glucose, it naturally goes in and out of ketosis. Babies are keto flexing, right? So we are designed to burn fat. And for most people, they have forgotten this process.
We are born to keto flex, we break it later, is really what happens. We destroy our God-given metabolisms. And really, like, you have a book, Keto Flex, which is just done extraordinarily well. I see it referenced here and there. I see you talking about it all over. It's brilliant. You're talking about this flexibility. And so metabolic freedom, of course, we deal with the psychology, we deal with the physiology, we deal with the microbiology. Ultimately, it gets us to the end result, which is being metabolically flexible, having this ability to keto flex in and out, just like a newborn baby was, as we are designed to do from birth before we break it as adults. Is that a fair assessment?
You nailed it, my friend. That's exactly it. The goal is metabolic freedom. The goal is not dogma. The goal is not to burn sugar forever. The goal is not to burn fat forever. The goal is to use whatever substrates are available, and that is metabolic freedom. That's the ultimate goal, yes.
Let's start packaging this up really pretty for our listeners. I mean, I know we're 40 minutes or so into this recording, and so I do want to make sure that we give them something really tangible. One of the things that, as practitioners, I know I've been guilty of is the doom and gloom, right? Hellfire is coming, repent now, everybody's sick and we got this going on and that going on, but very little tangible steps a lot of the time. It's something I'm really trying to do more of because it's important to raise awareness, but more important to give solutions. And so let's start packaging this up in a really digestible way, pun intended, on how people can really start to improve their metabolic flexibility. Can you give us like a 5-step plan coined by Ben Azadi right here about how to do this?
Yes, I can. I'll be happy to do that. First step is to lower your total carbohydrates to achieve ketosis. As I mentioned, you want to drop that under 50 total grams per day. Not in one day. I would say over the course of about 7 days, let's gradually decrease your carbs and increase your fats and proteins. And the fats should be from saturated fats and monounsaturated fats. You could do a quick Google search for that. You don't want too much of the polyunsaturated fats, which are the seed oils. You want to avoid that. So more fat and protein, less carbs. Do that for 7 days. You'll make that shift into fat burning. That is the first step. Well, I mean, the first step was the environment part and the mindset part. So that's the first step. Second step is the shift into ketosis. We'll outline it that way. So first step is to do that audit, chargers and drainers, make sure you're doing a good job with that mindset part. Second step is what I just mentioned with the fat burning approach of 7 days. The step after that is to have meal timing. And some people call it intermittent fasting. Some people call it time restricted feeding. I think meal timing is a gentle way to explain it. And I see sometimes when I start explaining things like intermittent fasting and people that are just not used to it, they look at me like I'm asking them to hold their breath for 10 minutes, and I could see it in their eyes. I'll make this really simple because once you achieve ketosis and fat burning, you're fat adapted after that 7-day protocol I just gave you, it makes it so much easier to meal time. And what I mean by mealtime is that you have a certain window throughout a 24-hour period where you consume your calories in your meals, and then you have a window where you're in a fasted state. So I think a gentle start here is like a 16-8 schedule, where 16 hours out of a 24-hour day, you're in that fasted state. What are you having? Water, tea, coffee, electrolytes, but you're not eating any meals or snacks in the 16 hours. Then you have an 8-hour eating window, and that window could be whatever's best for your schedule, but let's say it's going to be between 12 p.m. and 8 p.m., where you have maybe 3 meals, protein and fat focused, lower carbs. When you do that, the 16 hours you're fasting, amazing things start to happen. I mean, of course, you allow your digestive system to take a break from the constant starting up of digesting food, which takes a lot of energy. So there's some digestive benefits there. But there's also benefits in terms of the glucose and insulin levels that we spoke about. When you're in a fasted state, hour after hour, glucose and insulin will become to lower, it will drop and lower, become more sensitive, and ketones should rise as well. You'll see this nice switch start to happen. So you get healthier hormones and more sensitive hormones, I should say. It lowers inflammation. There's autophagy that can occur at different points as well. But I would do a 16-8 as the third step, meal timing. Now, an advanced part of this third tip would be to have your calories earlier in the day, if you can do that with your schedule, meaning instead of doing 12 p.m. to 8 p.m., maybe you do 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. as your eating window. The earlier you could bring your foods in the day, your calories, the healthier you're going to be. It just works better for our circadian rhythm. But I get our schedules are different, and we have families and we have dinner. So however you want to do it will work as long as you have that 8-hour eating window, 16-hour fasting window. The fourth tip would be, of course, to always start to revisit the fundamentals, the environment, the mindset, like continuously revisit that. And then I know this is not sexy and people don't like to hear about this, but sleep is another fundamental. You want to make sure, and Cynthia Thurlow talks a lot about this, you want to make sure your sleep is quality sleep. It's not really about the total hours of sleep. It's about the quality of the sleep that you're getting. Arguably, somebody could be more well-rested and getting more benefits of sleep from 6 hours than somebody getting 9 hours, because in those 6 hours, they're getting quality amounts of deep sleep and REM sleep. And you could track these things with different devices like an Oura Ring or an Apple Watch or a Fitbit or a Whoop Band. There's different ways to track it, but maybe also just how you feel when you wake up in the morning. But you want to make sure you're getting quality sleep. So prioritize that dark, cold bedroom. Avoid any stimulation and a lot of artificial light before bed, an hour before bed. Wear some blue light blocking glasses, but sleep is going to be important. That'll be tip number 4. Tip number 5 would be to, there's so many things I can offer for number 5.
And I really did ask you to condense a 5-step plan out of the blue. This was not planned at all. You're doing great. Keep going.
I would say tip number 5 would be movement. That's what's resonating with me right now. So, and that could mean, a workout, but it also could just mean like getting steps in depending on where your activity level is. I want to be fair to different walks of life here, but aim to work your way to get 10,000 steps a day. I think that's a good number to hit. And I think people say that's a bogus number, was made up, but I can tell you when I get 10,000 steps a day, I feel pretty good. And so do my students. So I like that as a target. And that could come from just walking. It could come from playing basketball, playing pickleball, which is super popular nowadays. It could come from a workout, but aim to get movement going. When you move your body, it does create a stress. And as we mentioned, not all stress is bad. It's only if you don't adapt to it that it becomes bad. There's that principle called hormesis that you referenced. But stressing your body by moving it around stresses the mitochondria, and it forces it to adapt, those little battery packs in your body, to get stronger and duplicate. And that is very important. It also gets the lymphatic system moving. You will have more energy. Josh, what did you do before we hit record here to get some energy, by the way?
I was out doing planking, doing some push-ups, did some squats. I got my body moving.
And how did you feel after?
Sweaty and amazing.
Yeah, sweaty and amazing, right? So for me too, I stood up. I put my stand-up desk up here because I was sitting down for the last 2 hours. So I moved my body. So that's the point. You'll have more energy. So that's the 5-step plan. Environment, fat adaptation, meal timing, sleep, and movement.
Man, I was just going to recap. I was writing those down here on my stickies as we went.
I beat you to it.
Job. You beat me to it. You're too good at this. Everybody, if you're listening, make sure you hire Ben as a keynote speaker because he's got this down pat. And so one of the questions that's going to be lingering in some of our listeners' minds here is those who go, okay, well, what about long-term fast, short-term fasting? I've heard about eating windows. Are these extraneous? Or when I try to fast, if I don't eat every 2 hours, I get really hangry and dizzy or nauseous. What's happening and what steps can we utilize to start becoming more flexible in these ways?
Yeah, well, okay, so this is a great question, and it's perfect because I just did a YouTube video that's coming out next week on the number one mistake people make with fasting. And
I'll link it in the show notes. That's great, yeah.
Oh, yeah, please, yeah, because it's perfect. And, it's different. The question that you asked has different answers. So let me first answer the one about I don't feel good during a fast, my blood sugars drop, etc. That is because you're not fat adapted yet. So if you follow the game plan, which I just mentioned, it's a 7-day protocol, gradually lowering carbs, increasing fat and protein. Once you're fat adapted, then you will feel great skipping a meal or skipping the snack. It's when you're a sugar burner and try to practice fasting that you feel that way. That's why that was the step before the meal timing part. Now, you could verify fat adaptation. If you're somebody like me who likes numbers to verify things, you could grab a ketone device, a ketone measuring device, a blood ketone measuring device like Keto Mojo. Now you're in Canada, you can't get Keto Mojo in Canada, at least the last time I checked, but there's a 4S6, which does something similar in Canada. So it tests your blood ketones. And if it's 0.5 or higher, you're fat adapted. Congratulations. So then you can verify it and then move on to fasting and you should feel great. That'll knock that out of the park. Now, you can also add in some electrolytes and minerals and things during your fast or shortening your window. But once you're fat adapted and start fasting, you'll feel better, not worse. Now, the other part of the question was, how do we know if we're adapting to fasting? And this is the video that I made, which is also going to be a podcast episode coming out next week. Well, it'll be out by the time this is out. And the number one mistake people make with fasting is that they don't understand that fasting is a stress to their body. So they see Josh do a 24-hour fast and they're like, I'm going to do a 24-hour fast. And they actually feel awful. And they wonder, why didn't it work for me? Because they don't understand the principle of hormesis. And if we could view everything we do from the lens of hormesis, everything will make sense. So the best way I could...
Hormesis?
What?
Can you define hormesis for our listeners?
Yeah. The best way I could explain it, and I did this in my video, but I don't have it here. But in those listening, just envision this. Imagine in my hands, I have 2 cups of water. In my right hand, the cup of water is filled to the top. In my left hand, the cup of water is maybe just 1/4 filled. So I want you to think of these 2 cups as your stress bucket. The cup that's filled to the top, if I try to stress it, meaning shake it for a little bit, what's going to happen? It's going to spill. I'm going to get symptoms because it's just overflowing. I can't shake it too much. The cup in my left hand that has just 1/4 filled up, I could really shake it and stress it. There's not going to be any symptoms, no spillage, because that stress bucket is low. Now, if your stress bucket is high and you start applying more stress, like fasting or exercise or cold plunging or sauna or red light, I could go on and on. You spill the cup, you get symptoms, you don't feel good, and you say, it just didn't work for me. Well, the goal is to lower your stress bucket. And the tips we gave you about mindset and environment and sleep will all help with that. But there's 2 ways to gauge if your fasting is working for you or against you. Should I share that, Josh?
I would love to hear that, Ben. Hit me with the good stuff.
Okay. The first one is your heart rate variability. Heart rate variability is the best metric to assess your nervous system. And your nervous system will give you symptoms when it is imbalanced. So we have 2 primary branches of the, am I still live with you?
I got you here. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, it says trying to reconnect. Make sure you're stable. Yeah. Okay.
Well, I got you still real time. So yeah, keep going. We'll just chop that bit out.
Okay, because I'm on Ethernet, so it should be good. I wanted to make sure. Okay.
Appreciate it.
The nervous system is really important to assess. Oh, let me say that again because I messed it up. Mm-hmm. We have 2 branches of the nervous system. We have the sympathetic branch, which is the fight or flight, adrenaline, cortisol, go chase down your prey and go kill it or run away from a predator. Very important in spurts, but you don't want to be locked in sympathetic. That's chronic stress. Stress bucket gets filled. Then we have the opposite branch, which is the parasympathetic, which is rest, digest, eliminate, right? Detoxification. That's also important, but you just don't want to be stuck in parasympathetic. You become weak and fragile. You want to have a good balance, sympathetic and parasympathetic. Now, heart rate variability will tell you and show you how good you are at balancing out both these branches. And how you want to do it, you want to get a device that measures heart rate variability. Again, there's Aura, Apple, Fitbit. Hanu Health has a continuous HRV device that I have, super cool. You want to get your average HRV. Do not compare your HRV to your husband, to your wife, to your friend, because everybody has a different HRV, and genetics do play a big part in this aspect. So you test for 7 days, and it gives you a number, MS, a number, and then the letters MS. And after 7 days, you get the average of those 7 readings. Let's say the average is 42. That is your baseline number. Then you start to apply different fasting schedules. Maybe it is a 24-hour fast you want to see if you adapt to. Well, you do a 24-hour fast. The next morning, when you check your HRV, did it drop below your baseline? Did it stay at baseline or did it increase? If it stayed at baseline or increased, that fast worked for you, not against you. If it dropped, it was too much of a stress for your body to adapt to, and the fast worked against you. Okay? That's the first step. Before I move on to the second one, is there anything you want me to clarify with that?
No, that's beautiful. In the future, if you ever ask, do I want to know? The answer is going to be yes, for sure. You do a great job explaining. Keep going.
That's good to know. The second one is actually using that blood glucose and blood ketone device. Keto Mojo is the one I use here in the US, but 406. And it comes with glucose strips and ketone strips. And what you want to do is you want to test throughout your fast. So let's say 12 hours into your fast, you do your first reading. You do your little finger prick, it draws some blood. You grab the ketone strip, get the blood in there, put it into the meter, gives you a number. Use the same blood. You don't have to prick again for the glucose strip and get that reading and write it down. Let's say it's 0.6 ketones and 87 milligrams per deciliters for glucose, which are really good numbers, by the way. And then let's say you are continuing your fast. So you did it at the 12-hour mark. Now, 3 hours later at the 15-hour mark, you test again. What you want to see is your glucose drop and your ketones rise. That is a sign of adapting to that stress of fasting. If you don't see that, if you see your glucose rise and your ketones drop, too stressful, your body's breaking down protein, you're going through gluconeogenesis, it's just your body couldn't handle it. Cup is too filled. So these are the two ways to know. And if you're in the camp of it's too stressful, HRV dropping, glucose and ketones not trending in the right direction, simple solution. Instead of doing a 16-hour fast, start with a 12-hour fast day in, day out, work on those stressors, and then build it back up. You want to look at fasting like a muscle. You could do the same test with any stress, exercise, cold plunge, sauna, red light therapy, PEMF mat, mental stress that goes on. It works for everything. So I would recommend doing those two tests, and you'll know if it works for you or against you.
Beautiful. And this is all stuff that can really be found inside Keto Flex as well, inside your book. There's such really great step-by-steps. People can dive in there and understand, like, what does it mean to be flexible and how can I do that? So I definitely recommend checking that out. But I want to toss the ball back to you one more time, Ben, before we start wrapping things up here. Is there anything we haven't touched on? Anything that you think is just burning in the back of your mind? Any famous last words for the listeners? What's the note you'd like to leave this interview on today?
Well, first of all, Josh, it's been fantastic collaborating with you for the second time. You're a great host, and I knew that because you were a great guest, and it translates very well. You do great questions, you got great energy, and I just appreciate who you are. And I love your work, and I love your social media content. And I love you're helping just so many people with a high success rate, and just bravo to what you're doing first and foremost.
Thank you very much. I'll make sure to put that on my website.
Yeah. Put that whole clip on there. I meant it.
Thank you.
We spoke about the importance of mindset, and we'll end the conversation talking about this. The average person has about 50 to 60,000 thoughts every day. And the psychiatrists estimate that 90% of those thoughts are negative thoughts. Zig Ziglar used to call it stinking thinking. And I've been saying, if you're thinking and stinking, your dreams are shrinking. and 85% of those thoughts are the same thoughts from yesterday, meaning we're not really originating thoughts. We're not thinking, essentially. Bob Proctor used to say 2% of the population think, 3% of the population think they think, and 95% of the population would rather die than think. Just because you have mental activity does not mean you're thinking. It's usually the same thoughts, and it's usually negative thoughts. And I say this because your thoughts, according to cell biologist Dr. Bruce Lipton, have the ability to communicate with your DNA. Meaning, if you have a negative thought, a hateful thought, an angry thought, a resentful thought, the signal sent to your DNA is to produce proteins that are inflammatory, that shorten your telomeres, which damage your DNA and shorten your lifespan. However, if it's a loving thought, a grateful thought, an abundant thought, same signal is sent to your DNA, but now the protein that is produced is anti-inflammatory. Your telomeres, which protect your DNA, are strengthened and lengthened, and there's not DNA damage, and you extend your lifespan. So if you have 60,000 thoughts per day and your thoughts have the ability to create health or disease, you have 60,000 opportunities every single day to heal your body. That is the greatest health tip I think I could ever share with anybody. And I really hope and pray you take that to heart and start creating healthier thoughts, and that will create healthier proteins, and it will create a healthier you and a healthier, happier world at the end of the day.
What a beautiful place to end this interview. Ben, thank you so much for bringing your energy, your wisdom, your experience, your knowledge. I just always love when we get a chance to connect. I'll be looking forward to more of this in the future. And I just want to know, you got so much on the go, you got so many things. Where is it you'd like to direct our listeners? I mean, you've got content, you got a YouTube page, you got books, you got so much amazing stuff. What's the best piece of information you want to drive people to right now once they finish the show?
Thank you, Josh. I appreciate that and the opportunity here. My website has everything, benazadi.com. It has everything, the books, the courses, etc. And since this is a podcast, I'll just plug my Metabolic Freedom podcast. You might want to start with Josh's episode. He was on about a month ago. It was amazing. So we're available on all podcast platforms, and we're 770 something episodes deep. So we have a lot out there for you to listen to, but I recommend you start with Josh's episode. It's called Metabolic Freedom Podcast.
And definitely give that a check, actually. So Metabolic Freedom Podcast, if you guys don't know, is actually globally ranked right now as a top 0.5%, which is just fantastic. So great show. I've learned a lot listening to it, and I'm sure everybody will check that out here, Ben. I'll put the links in the show notes, and it was a pleasure having you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate you.